All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on AI, how to separate science fact from science fiction. I'm Joel Griffin, Director of Marketing for North America at ISS, and I will be your moderator for today's program. With the advent of AI and deep learning technologies in the video surveillance industry, integrators and end users alike have been bombarded with an array of new jargon and buzzwords that must be sifted through to better understand the true capabilities of the technology. But for all the hype, education around analytics technology is still woefully lacking. In today's webinar, we're going to take a look at and provide a clear definition of many of the terms you see associated with video analytics today, explain what is possible and not possible with AI, as well as examine the state of adoption of the technology and the road ahead. Today's webinar will be broken down into several parts. Following a quick introduction of this topic and speakers, we will examine the capabilities of AI in the industry today, followed by why many integrators remain hesitant to adopt the technology. After that, we'll take a look at some practical tips for deploying AI in the field, and we'll also look at the roadmap for the future of analytics in the space. The last 15 to 20 minutes of today's program will be reserved for Q&A with you, our audience. Please submit a question at any time using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. We will answer as many of these questions as we can verbally during the time allotted. Finally, at the conclusion of today's program, we will randomly select an attendee who stayed on for the duration of the event to receive a $100 Amazon gift card. The winner will be notified via email. The first speaker for today's program is Matt Powell, Managing Director for North America at ISS. Matt has more than 2 decades of experience in security and transportation technologies, having formerly served as Principal for Infrastructure Markets at Convergent and as a developer of transportation market strategies for both video alarm and mode prior to that. Your second speaker for today's program is Eugene Beytenbrod, Global Director of Engineering for ISS. Eugene has more than 20 years of experience in the security industry, specializing in software development, project management, and the creation of support infrastructure. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Matt. Matt, take it away.
Joel, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sound good.
And since Eugene and I are staying through the duration of this, we are not able or eligible to win the Amazon gift card. So sorry, Eugene. Go ahead and go to the next one. And as Joel said, my name is Matt Powell. I'm the Managing Director for North America here at ISS, and we're excited to bring this webinar to you. It's something that when I was in the integration world for about 8 years, and prior to that manufacturing, I wish somebody would have brought to me way back when all of these buzzwords started. There are a couple of assumptions, or about 4 assumptions we're going to make today in terms of attendees. One, we assume that you know the basics of video management and IP cameras. The second, that you have some familiarity with deploying video management and IP camera technology. Third, that you know some of the basic definitions of phrases such as on-premises, edge, and cloud capabilities. If we assumed wrong, and we all know what happens when you assume, please contact us and we'll make sure that we provide our basic video intelligence presentation for you at another time. And that way we can add a little bit more context here. Next slide. So we're going to talk about reality versus hyperbole here. You can go to the next slide on this. First, let's define artificial intelligence. We've been doing this for 26 years now and 23 patents on this. So we have a large number of engineers who work underneath Eugene in his role as Global Director of Engineering. But Joel, if you want to click play on that video real quick. When we talk about AI, you can see over here, this is a hand washing analytic that we've patented and that we use. Somebody washes their hands, they dry their hands, they can get through the turnstile. The next person comes up, they're not able to get through because they tried to fake it. AI means that we're trusting an analytic system as if it is a human to make a notification of a behavior. So in the past, before videos, someone would have to see you actually wash your hands, dry your hands, and then push a button to let you through the turnstile. AI means it's an artificial intelligence. We're going to trust it to replicate an action that you would take as a human. And we're going to do that with a machine or an algorithm. An algorithm is just a mathematical formula. It's telling the program of the computer how to operate on its own. But the more complex it is, the more challenging the algorithm has to be. And this is why AI, and we'll use a lot of these terms interchangeably for a moment here, AI is generally task-based. So you're trying to ask it to do something. You're trying to say, okay, know when somebody washes their hands. It has to know what washing hands is, know what drying their hands is. So you have to teach it what that is. It's task-based, and the more complex the task, the more it tends to fail, which is why it's very successful in labs and very successful in demos. But once you actually get out in the real world, it starts to have challenges. And a lot of this has to do with some of the stuff that Eugene's going to talk about today, which is the learning that goes into it. Here at ISS, we use deep learning and neural network training. So we're using large amounts of data to train the algorithms. Most of our training has at least 500 hours that's going into it in terms of locations. All these are templates. So locations, time and timing, different weather, quantity of people, known events. And so we're using about 500 hours to start our training so that we get highly accurate analytic as it goes out into the field, versus machine learning, which uses a small amount of data to train the algorithm. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And within this, we see some of the challenges. So we just showed you, and we'll show you some other, very complex but task-based analytics that we use and that people use out in the field. But there's a challenge here. One of the things about reality versus hyperbole is marketing ploys. So a lot of times what will happen is that companies will take a basic line analytic. And when I talked about those assumptions, this is an assumption that we're going to make, is that you know what a line analytic is. They will take the line analytic and they will call it anti-vandalism. And the concept being that, well, if somebody passes this line at your property, then they must be wanting to vandalize the property. And this is something that a lot of your cameras probably already do. And this kind of brings us to your use case. When you compare what you define as an incident against the capabilities of the analytic, and commonly the name of it doesn't actually match. So somebody might tell you, hey, we've got this analytic for, let me give you an example, the basic line analytic. If you're looking for occupancy, a basic line analytic, it may tell you how many people came into a room, and it may be a little bit more advanced, and it can tell you how many left. But it won't tell you how long they stayed. It won't tell you if they stayed at one desk or one teller window for a while. It won't tell you if they were staying in one line and then switched to another line. So a basic line analytic saying that it's an occupancy analytic can be very deceptive. And what that means is that you end up with a low accuracy in terms of measuring your use case versus what the analytic was able to do, because somebody told you it was something that actually, in terms of machine learning, it wasn't. Next slide. Actually, next slide. Let's go to why integrators are skeptical. And I'm skeptical, and I remember this from my integration days. Next slide here. So first, poor marketing. If we go back in history, we have to be honest. A lot of early analytics didn't work, or they weren't highly accurate because it was the early days. We started doing this. We released our first LPR analytic in 2003. Our first line analytics were in 1996. So it resulted in a lot of bad references out there. But the second and third one is where I really want to focus in. It's the inability to define terms simply. Algorithm versus analytic versus AI versus deep learning. We often ask a lot of our clients if anyone remembers when someone explained these terms, and you didn't have to go behind a paywall to learn it, right? So at ISS, we actively work to teach our end users, integrators, and make our engineers available because we want to educate the customer. And when the market can't define something, it starts to get skeptical, because the first time that you get burned and you weren't able to actually define it, you have a challenge. And let me speak on this for a minute when I come to number 3. It's important to remember in this space that there's a lot of startups and there's a lot of companies that want to gain funding. And a lot of these have POC-based business models. So proof of concept-based business models is really focusing on getting as many proof of concept. So if you're an integrator and somebody calls you up, do you have anybody that wants to try our stuff? Anybody that wants to try our stuff? Or you're an end user and people call you up asking you to try their stuff, and you wonder, man, why are they trying to get so much stuff done? These are very shiny to have for startups and for young companies that are doing this type of technology, because a company that can rack up a large number of proof of concepts is very attractive to uneducated investors. And one of the things you're going to notice today is we're going to say things that are probably going to shock people, probably offend people a little bit, because we want to really educate you about science fact versus science fiction. You know, in the past, companies would try to get POCs to get more footage for their training so they could get better analytics. But now a company can become a partner to other companies like NVIDIA and Intel. They offer a lot when you join their different programs for analytics partners, or you can get license-free captures and footage to train your analytics. So you don't need people out there to provide you a space to go do a POC as much, because now if a lot of the companies that are out there, they can go get it for free, license free. So in reality, what happens in today's markets is that if you're a young company and you've got 15 airports and 5 port authorities and 8 banks who have installed a POC, regardless if they will ever purchase it or not, they get to have a great story for investors. So these POC-based business models are a real challenge, and we caution everybody to be aware of this. If you're an end user, research and ask hard questions. That's important. How long will they be around? How much service can you expect? When is the next update to the software? And if you're an integrator, ask the same questions, because in this space, at this point, the technology is developed enough that this should be about developing long-lasting relationships and not about trying to get more end users for a proof of concept. Next slide. Other reasons that people have challenges here, and it's the installation versus the deployment. A lot of times you're going to hear it works out of the box, and high accuracy AI and video analytics, they're not easy, and it requires some professional services from a manufacturer, or it's going to require an AI integrator. Secondly, our AI needs to learn your environment. We hear that a lot too. Typically, it means, if we go back to what we talked about, which is the quantity of footage that people were able to use to train their analytics, if the AI needs to learn your environment past a very limited window, it typically means it has a limited amount of data that has gone into training the AI. So they're going to use you to train their AI, since they didn't have all the footage of weather, time and timing, different individuals, and so forth. And one of the reasons that this, or one of the examples I have of this is something that I experienced, was this slide photo over here is very indicative of sometimes what happens with low accuracy analytics. Years ago in the integration field, we had an analytic in an airport that flew a lot of people to Hawaii. So a lot of people wore Hawaiian shirts. The carpet had a certain geometric shape to it and different designs on it. And the analytic could not tell the difference between the Hawaiian shirt and the carpet patterns. And this is basically what the analytic was seeing, because it was low accuracy, didn't have a lot of footage and training. So you have to be careful when you hear it needs to learn your environment, because they're going to be training it on your environment instead of doing the deep learning previous to kind of get all of those bugs out of the way. And the last thing to think about is the lack of US-based support and service. If they have one US salesperson and everyone else is based overseas, then you really have to ask the question about, even if it is a high quality AI, how are you going to get service? How are you going to make sure that it deploys properly? So understanding how many people they have that are in North America or in the country that you're in, besides one salesperson and one engineer, that's a question of scaling. If they get 10, 20, 30, 40 clients, you can run into challenges real quick continuing to get service on the system that you've bought. Next slide. Also, we have a noisy market, and this is something that I think a lot of people have found, which is a lot of the VMS companies are, they pose as AI companies. And what I mean by that is that they have different functionalities that they are stating are artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence for us, we have 23 patents. We've been at this for 26 years. So we understand it has a long R&D cycle. And so you want to understand the core business of the company that you're dealing with. If it's a video management company, you want to ask how many patents they have. Have they developed them internally? What are the patents? Or did they buy the patent? You want to understand how much they're able to support what they're calling AI and what their artificial intelligence actually is. And startups that are here for a good time, not a long time. This is one of those strange things that we've seen in the past, 7 to 10 years. Is the large quantity of startups around analytics. They have an analytic platform, but they don't have a video platform. You have to connect them to whatever you have. And then they go back to that POC-based model. Some of the things that you want to do on this is ask about the founding date and research their financial background. If they're getting, private equity funding, that's not the same as selling a product. And so you want to ask about their founding date. You want to understand where they came from. You want to understand their financial background to see if they're still going to be around. And also research the patents. You should be able to go to the US Patent Office or any country that you're in, and if they have a patent in that country, you should be able to look it up. And there's a big difference between a health company that has one patent, and they've patented an algorithm for detecting something specific in the healthcare market in a hospital, and a company buying up other firms with patents. So make sure that you're researching the patents so you understand exactly what you're getting into and know if they're going to be around for a long time and not just a short time until somebody sells them or somebody buys them or they sell themselves. Next slide. Eugene?
All right, perfect. Thanks for that, Matt. So my name is Eugene Beytenbrod. I'm Director of Engineering. So I'm going to talk a little bit about evaluating analytics. So go to the next slide, Joe. So if I'm in the market for purchasing new analytic, these are some of the things that I'm typically looking into, right? So experience matters. Okay, so Matt touched on this a little bit, especially in the world of AI and deep learning, right? I mean, you want to have experience over a large amount of projects, which means you've seen different environments, you've seen different data sets. Over the years, you've been able to tweak that analytic, right? So it's easy to get to 90% on something, but that extra percent to get to 95, 96, that doesn't happen overnight, right? So this is something that you only gain with many years of experience and seeing different scenes and scenarios. You're able to improve your accuracy. And as Matt mentioned as well, smaller companies, there's a lot of them, a lot of startups. They just have an engine. They don't have a foundation. They don't have a platform to run on. You definitely want to be careful with those as they come and go quite often. If you're going to be investing, if you want to just try something out, right, or buy a license or two, well, not much. Not much risk, right? But if you're going to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into a solution, you want to make sure it's going to be there for the long term. Okay. So next slide. Support infrastructure. I can't stress this enough. Matt also mentioned a little bit about that. So, you get your analytic accuracy seems, sufficient, right? Support, is just as important, if not more important, right? So if you deploy and you start having issues, you want to be rest assured that you have local support available. That means engineers that could come on site. A lot of things you just can't do remotely, especially with AI. We talk about different behaviors need to be replicated, right? Unless you as the end user are prepared to facilitate, right, and do some of the support yourself, you want to make sure the vendor you are investing in can come on site and resolve these types of issues in a timely fashion. And includes phone support as well. So you want to make sure that in your time zone, you pick up a phone, somebody's there somebody's either remoting or showing up on site and fixing some of these issues. So the support is a big one for me. Next slide. Understanding what you want to accomplish. So this is kind of a big one. So a lot of times it's, well, AI, and yes, let's get it installed. I want all of that. But once you start getting into the specifics, it's not always clear what problem you're trying to solve. And I think that's kind of an important thing when purchasing these types of technologies, understanding what's that issue, right? Whether it's I'm having revenue loss because of some problem, whether it's just a safety or security issue that I'm trying to resolve, whether it's something in logistics that I'm trying to solve, but understanding what the analytic is trying to solve, it's critical. And this will kind of lead you to which type of analytic you're going to be purchasing. So we have analytics for detecting things, right? So if you need to detect something, right, whether it's the usual face or vehicle or something more specific or more complex, but understanding what it is will help you understand what engine, what technology you're going to be purchasing. And maybe that doesn't exist today. Maybe it's something that needs to be developed. And if it's not detecting something, then it's analyzing some behavior, right? So if you need to analyze, and we'll talk about a couple different scenarios for behavior, but whether it's for compliance or safety, and you want to know if somebody's fighting, right, or doing something, right, you want to clearly be able to replicate that, because that's part of what the rules that are going to be created on top of the AI. They're going to be based on this understanding of that behavior. So this is very important. Next slide. So technology considerations, it's, so marketing, right? So you can start with marketing, reading up about the technology. I mean, you definitely want to get a little bit under the hood, figure out technologically what engines, what platforms, what's the infrastructure for the algorithms that are being used by the technology that you pick. But honestly, I mean, what the safest bet is always testing it, right? So you can have the best marketing in the world, but you'll find out pretty soon whether something works or not. So being able to do a pilot or a test before you commit to an investment, I think it's very important. And reputable companies, you're going to be able to read about somebody else already testing them. So this might speed up this evaluation process, right? There's sites out there that do shootouts, and you can, people write blogs and posts about experiences they had with different technologies, and they'll be able to, share those experiences if they've deployed this technology. You certainly don't want to be the guinea pig, but if it's something new, you definitely want to get a hold of it yourself and do some testing. Maybe you have some unique use case which hasn't been tested, and you're like, hey, let me get a license here and make sure this is actually solving my problem. So ease of use, it's twofold. So you want the system to have the basic, user interface that's very friendly, right? You should have a web, you should have a mobile app, thick client, but certainly you don't want to sacrifice any of the intelligence. So sometimes things are too simple and they're missing some key features, right? They're missing some important features from the interface or just search functionality. So you definitely don't want to sacrifice. It should be a nice, medium between the two. Okay, next. So this one here, it's important, specifically the interoperability. So when you're purchasing some software, you want to make sure that it will run in in a whole infrastructure that you have. So if your infrastructure has a video management, access control, fire alarm, right? All the systems that are part of your security infrastructure, you want to make sure that this technology fits right into it and it easily integrates, right? So you want to make sure that if you have an existing VMS, that if you're purchasing this new AI analytic, that it's fully integrated with that VMS or that access control system. There are solutions out there that will provide a lot of these things in the same package, right? So a lot of the more mature products will come with the VMS already embedded, and it'll come with all the APIs and SDKs to allow you to easily integrate with other third-party systems your deployment may have. But it's important. You don't want to purchase something and then realize they don't integrate with anybody, and then you basically have to do the integration yourself, or even worse, find out that they don't have APIs to be able to integrate with some of these other systems. Okay, so this is something definitely you want to keep in mind. Next. So I think back to you, Matt, for the next couple of slides, right? You're on mute.
If you could, Joel, I want to go back to slide number 7, which is integrating AI into your operations center when you get a chance. Go back, keep going. There. So just pause right here. This is, okay, so a lot of you are saying, how do I integrate AI into my environment? What do I do here? Matt, Eugene, I'm thinking about getting AI. So we're going to take this a little bit step at a time here. The first thing is think of how you will view it, not what you will view. So this is a really important part. And let me give you an example of this. When I was in the integration world, I was working with a client, and they were using a search engine AI to kind of consolidate everything that would happen, and people would dial into the operations center and say, hey, we need to look for this and we need to look for that. Great technology. They had one workstation. So people would queue up 15 to 20 people at a time waiting to get onto that workstation so that they were able to actually perform a search. Within 3 months, and they had spent about $500,000 on an analytic, on a search engine or a video search analytic. Within 3 months, they had spent $500,000. They no longer used it because nobody wanted to use it. They had one workstation. So an AI system is useless if you can't use it. Complex integrations into VMS, like Eugene was just talking about, they can be a problem. And you don't want to believe, well, it's just a simple API integration into your VMS. You have to test this stuff out. You want references. You also have to understand that not everything has been done before. So that's when you really need to set out a good scope of work so that how you view it is the most important part of it. Because at the end of the day, if the AI is working and the analytics are working, you're going to get what you purchased. But whether you can use it and how you're going to use it in your day-to-day operations center, completely different issue. So make sure that you think of that first. The other thing that we want to look at is something that people don't do, and I have seen a lot of. You hear, oh, it doesn't work. And they bought the system 4 years ago, and it doesn't work anymore. We really don't use it. It doesn't work. Typically, that's because people haven't updated their concept of operations. So they purchased their AI system at the very beginning, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and their operations center has changed, and their systems have changed, and their integrations have changed, leadership has changed, stakeholders has changed, everything has changed. And at no point did they sit down and review the concept of operations and compare the original concept of operations to how they're using it today. So you want to partner with an experienced AI integrator, or you want to develop a working group internally to evaluate your system against the use case once a year. How's it working? Is it still working? Do we need to make changes? All the way down to how your workstations are set up, how your dispatch is working with the system, and so forth. Update your concept of operations at least once a year, and you'll actually get a lot of mileage out of these systems, and you'll be able to continue to view everything in a way that you can operationally use it if you update your operation or your concept of operations. Go ahead and go back to what does the future hold. I can tell you right now, if I can tell you one thing about these systems and how they work, whether it's 3,000 cameras or 3 cameras, if you have a strong scope of work when you have an AI integrator install it, and if you have a very strong concept of operations at the very beginning to define how you're going to use the system, and you update religiously, update your concept of operations year after year, you will get a lot of success out of the system. And you'll also be able to understand the limitations of the system and be able to create processes to make up for that in your operations. So let's talk about the future here, because a lot of people ask this question. I got a few things, then Eugene's going to show some videos, and then I think we're right at the time limit. So AI is going to become an enabler of packages. And what I mean by that is that we're already seeing it with our unifier system, that it's an automated decision management system. AI is not only going to learn from your video, but from your operations. And you, through repeated decision making, are going to be able to help train the artificial intelligence in real time so that it helps you make better decisions. We talk about moving from reactive to predictive to proactive. Reactive means that you're reacting to everything. Predictive means that the AI is telling you something has happened, or these things typically occur when you want to go respond to something. And then, being proactive means making changes into your environment in order to prevent behaviors from happening. These packages now, it's going to learn from your operations. I mean, right now, we were talking about it this morning, Eugene, where we were talking about taking weight scales and some different readers in the environment, bringing it all in. You put it through one of the AI layers, and it's going to learn about all of your gauges in your environment, your weight scales in your environment, and it's going to compare that with the video. So this is going to be more about packages and solving overall problems in the future. The other thing is it's going to be more interactive. It's going to be more like, hey Siri, than pulling up manual screens and moving a joystick around. It's not going to be very long before you're talking to your AI and you're asking it, when people look at ChatGPT and some things that are out there like that and how they're enabling better search of the internet because it's kind of consolidating everything down. We're going to talk about this at the very end, but be prepared for things to be more interactive. And if you're wondering how to do that, talk to companies like us about how these systems are learning and how they're becoming more interactive and understanding how to better communicate with these systems. Because like I said, it's going to be much more like Hey Siri than it is right now in about 5 years. Next slide. Detection versus data. One thing that we need to, I got my AI over here with my phone thinking that I'm talking to it because I kept saying, hey Siri, and it's still talking to me. So one of the things that we need to remember is that you can do more data with video than any other platform. Other platforms are very necessary in terms of sensors in the environment, but the future is going to be more cameras, not less, to feed deep learning. These systems are hungry and they want more footage so that they can learn more as time goes on. So it's time to start working on your policies right now. How are you going to protect privacy? How are you going to educate the public coming into your area that you have more cameras? How are you going to put smaller cameras in rooms to do occupancy so that you can feed it to develop a more efficient operation while you're protecting the rest of your operation and protecting the privacy of the public? And we focus on detection right now, but this is shifting. And this is something that Eugene brought up earlier, which is, why are you getting it? Is it to stop theft or reduce shrink? Because each is a different set of AI. Each has a different ConOps, but both use video. So you want to make sure that you understand what you're doing and why, because you focus on detection today, but as this shifts away from that, we're going to be more and more looking at how are we using video to solve problems and predict events. You don't want to do as much detection. You'd rather be told something is happening or these things are happening. So typically that results in this type of incident occurring. And so while we're focused on detection today, in the future, it's going to be able to take large amounts of data that you fed into it through your video management, through all of your sensors, through your doors, and it's going to be able to be better predictive about what will happen so you can become proactive. Next slide. Eugene?
All right. So some other things that, from our side here, at least for me, the requests that we're getting, the projects that we're getting, we're doing a lot of detection-based analytics, right? And this has been a trend for already a number of years, right? Detecting some type of an object and classifying it. What we see now more and more is analyzing behavior. Okay, so this is a trend that I think is going to continue to grow. Different types of behaviors, right, that we can be looking for. So we have use cases where we want to, for security purposes, see if somebody's doing graffiti or vandalism, right? We want to see if somebody's falling down. Maybe it's in a public area. Maybe this is like in a hospital scenario. Fighting. This could be use case, could be prisons. It could be in school. It could be, different use cases. Being able to analyze behavior, it's certainly, more complex. So you need data sets. You need to understand what that behavior looks like, meaning you should be able to replicate it, right? And there's different technologies that will help us to create this analytic. So if you go to the next slide. So the solution, it's a couple part solution to do behavioral analytics. The first one, as you saw in those videos, it's a very common to use a skeleton-based recognition engine. So this is a neural engine. It basically locates your limbs, your key points. It's going to visually represent that, and that's kind of how the engine is working. So it's finding the location of all your key points in your body and your limbs in the scene. It's saving all of that information as metadata. Okay, and the next step of it is the semantic analyzer piece, and this is the piece where you write the rules. Okay, you write the rules of the things that you are looking for in that scene. Okay, and this can be done basically using close to a natural language. So you're almost writing out the exact scenario that you're trying to catch. So the combination of this natural language, and you can create pretty complex rules, right? So much different than your kind of, legacy analytic systems. You can create compounded rules here. And you have what's called a linguistic processor that converts this text using the built-in AI. Okay, so this is where the technology is going for behavioral analytics. The next slide. Another thing that I think, we already see that, right? It's been happening probably for the last, 3 to 5 years, and it's going to continue to happen, is we're going to be putting more analytics and more powerful analytics in our edge devices, right? So our cameras are going to be able to do more on the edge, and edge devices that get placed typically somewhere next to cameras or IoT devices are going to get smarter and smarter. And this is because of the technology behind these devices. This is because of the embedded chipsets and the processors that are coming out with, new generation stuff, right? So a lot of the embedded cameras, a lot of these edge devices, they use, for example, ARM-based processors. And as these get more powerful, we can run more analytics on such processors. And there's already devices out there that are pretty common, right? So NVIDIA has a great device, the Jetson, and there's other companies, Qualcomm and others, that also use these ARM processors for edge analytics. So this is certainly a trend that we see. Okay, next one. And compute. So compute productivity. There's basically running AI, especially on a large scale, especially when you're talking about some of this more advanced engines. This is the platforms, right, are getting more robust. So we have Intel that keeps releasing new generation processors. They have a platform for running neural networks called OpenVINO. We have NVIDIA that also has their own platform, which is also, very powerful, called the CUDA platform, which a lot of the AI training is actually done using the NVIDIA cards. As these technologies improve, as the platform to run and train AI analytics improves, we can basically do much more cameras on a server, right? And kind of expand the server footprint compared to where we were a few years ago, right? So a few years ago, if it was some advanced analytic, you would have to spend like 20 grand in a server, and you might be able to do a few channels of analytics, where today, you can get up to 50 channels maybe on the same type of hardware. And with the newer generation things, you can even run more channels than that. And it's a big thing because, you're buying analytics, you're spending a lot of money, but then, you have to spend even 10 times more money to run, for the hardware. And that becomes a problem, right? So to be able to expand the hardware footprint between the server CPUs and GPUs, it's very important. And that's kind of where some of these, partners like Intel and NVIDIA are investing a lot of resources to come out with that next gen technology. Okay, next. Okay, so I think we reached the Q&A section.
Yes, we have. Thank you, Eugene. Again, you can submit a question using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We've already had a few questions roll in throughout the program. Matt, I'll address this first question that we received to you. They said, how can I learn more about AI? Because from everything they've heard here today, they're fully interested in the technology. Are there any books on the subject of AI that you could recommend?
So if you want an objective understanding of AI and analytics and so forth, Coursera, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Coursera. Look, we want people to be highly educated before they engage with us, so that they're kind of speaking the same language. And if you're not, we will educate you all day long. We've got plenty of pretty objective presentations that we can do for anybody who wants to learn more about AI and what we do with it. Coursera has some great courses that you can audit for free. So you can go to Coursera and look up AI. I think there's one from the University of London. It's actually required for all of our sales folks, and it's free to audit. And you actually get to go in and build your own basic algorithm, and you learn everything about it. It's very objective that you can learn from. So you can contact us. You can always email me, matt@issivs.com, or hit me up on LinkedIn. Contact Eugene. We make ourselves available. Or if you want a very objective one, you can go over to Coursera, and I think it's the University of London, but hit me up on LinkedIn or email me, and I'll get you that course link that you can audit for free.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Eugene, I'm going to direct this question to you, and the attendee asks, is the metadata coming from the new cameras helping our AI in any way?
So that's a good question. So if you're purchasing cameras that have the built-in analytics, those analytics are creating their own data, right? Their own metadata. So it's not helping, let's say, somebody else or a third party, right? So technologies that are creating their own AI, they're getting data sets, right? There's data sets available out there for download. There's data sets that sometimes we make arrangements with partners to get data. But if your camera already has analytic built into it, that means that analytic was already programmed and trained on some data set. So that metadata will not necessarily be useful for another analytic, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Eugene. Another question direct your way, Eugene. What would you say are the best practices for installation of cameras and hardware to make AI work at its peak performance?
So that's a good question. Short answer is depending on which type of analytic, right? Your camera installation will be slightly different. So to make it simple, most of the cameras we use today, they're off-the-shelf cameras, 1080p. So if you want a bigger field of view, you might go with a higher resolution, right? If you need to reach your pixel density, you might go with a little bit higher resolution. In terms of angles, it depends on the analytic, right? So if you're doing something like a facial, you don't want too steep of a camera angle. Typically, you're within 15, 20 degrees vertically, horizontally. If you're doing something like license plate or some transportation analytic where you want to get vehicles or plate numbers, then you could be at 45 degrees, right? Like on an overhead type of install. So depending on the analytic, we have guidelines for camera positioning, your pixels per foot requirements, and things like that.
Thank you, Eugene. Matt, I'm going to direct this question to you, and this is something that I've heard a lot of technologists and things like that in the past bring up. They say, so basically AI only operates on what you program or train into it, so it doesn't technically have a mind of its own. And so, do you, agree or disagree with that? And is AI, do you think it's only here to assist us with everyday type of things, or will it actually, give us some of that long-term trend data to become more predictive?
So for the purpose of this presentation, we're talking about video intelligence, ISS and secure OS of video intelligence platform. So we're taking video, we're taking all the sensors out into the environment, we're bringing it in, processing it with the analytics, and then putting it into a layer that you can use. This is not Skynet, but I can't speak to all of the programs that are out there. I think we see all the time that there are challenges with these systems. And if you look at like ChatGPT and the Bing AI, you've got a data set. The data set is the internet, and then you've got the algorithms that they programmed to take all the information of the internet, and then when you ask a question, to understand the question that you're asking, and then use the internet as the context for it. So that is its data set. And for us, the video or the data that's coming in off of different devices is our data set. And so, we can only do with what we have, which is that data set. And then one of the things that's important to remember is that when we talked earlier about 500 hours to get things going, some of our stuff has a compounding effect because we're constantly training. So you have some of our analytics out there that have hundreds of thousands of hours worth of training because they've been around for so many years that they have this massive amount of data set to apply the algorithms to. So if we have a facial analytic that's seen millions of faces, then that's how you end up with 99.7% accuracy on our facial. If you're talking about the semantic behavior analyzer, which Eugene talked about, this is something that's seen tens of thousands of hours of workplace environments and somebody identifying behaviors that happen into it. And what Eugene talked about with the semantic behavior analyzer that we have, where you can just type in a question and it will go find it for you. It's like a search engine for your video, that you're using common language, and the system understands how to translate that common language into what is in the data set. It's very similar to Chat GPT for video intelligence. So with this new product that we're bringing out, it's something that you can go in and just ask it for stuff and it will come back and bring the video to you. It's not that simple. Eugene is in another state from me and he's kicking me under the virtual table right now. But what I would say is that the reason that you want a company with a lot of patents, and the reason that you want a company that has millions of hours of footage that it's looked through, is that it understands more and more data sets, and it understands what happens within that data set that creates outcomes. And so when you tell it, I want to know X and I want that in a report and I want that on a dashboard, then the more time that you've had a company analyzing data sets in video and then bringing it through and improving the accuracy, the more that your report as a stakeholder, your dashboard is going to be more accurate. If a company has only had 180 hours worth of training on an analytic and you ask it to give you a lot of information about it, you're going to have a difficult time doing that. So, for video intelligence, not Skynet, like I said, but I can't speak to other systems that are out there. That being said, we are able to give very high accuracy. Most of our stuff is 90% accuracy starting off with what we offer with our modules that can give very accurate reports and data for somebody to use.
Thank you, Matt. I think that's a great transition to another question that we had, which is, what are the biggest misconceptions about AI from your vantage point that you see right now in the market? And, what are some examples that you can share?
That it is AI. And what I mean by that, if you go back to the first slide, is that it is trusting a machine to do an action that a human would do. And so if I told you that I had, 1,500 hours worth of training and identifying a behavior, and that I add a bunch of patents to my name, and I told you what behavior happened, you'd probably trust me. If I told you I had, 100 hours worth of training, I'd, been around the block at a couple of different companies, no patents, you'd probably question if I told you something that had happened. And that's how you end up with people having manual reviews all the time, because they don't trust the analytic. And so to move from an analytic, which is, okay, this has happened, let me send a notification, to artificial intelligence, which is allowing the machine to make a decision for you, to open a door because somebody has washed their hands, to send a notification for needing medical assistance because somebody is slumped, and that's different than lying down or sitting, and that 98% of the time slumping means that somebody needs medical attention, so it automatically calls EMS. That's artificial intelligence. That's an intelligence making that decision. And so I think the entire premise of calling things artificial intelligence that have low accuracy and do not have large amounts of data sets, that's the defining line for me when it comes to misconceptions. Just because it's artificial intelligence doesn't mean it's highly intelligent. It may be of low intelligence. It may be a baby while we're out there as a college grad. And I think you have to pay attention to that. And that's why asking, how many patents do you have? How many engineers? When have these things been created? That's why it's important to ask those questions if you're going to get into the AI space.
I got one more for you, Matt, is self-learning. This is another one that I think it's kind of a misconception. It's a very catchy phrase that a lot of people use in their marketing, that their analytic is self-learning. The reality is, in our industry, technology is not there yet. the AI is not self-learning. It still needs to be trained on data sets. It needs to be kind of programmed to look for something specific. There is a manual step somewhere along the way. It's not just you turn it on and it self-learns and kind of starts doing its own thing. This is another misconception that a lot of people use in their marketing, and it's not true. So
one
And
last
Eugene, folks, Eugene, not you are an engineer. How long have you been doing this, Eugene?
with ISS, 17 years.
So he's been with us 17 years doing analytics and algorithms and AI and everything else just at ISS. So, Eugene, you can call him up at any time and he talked to you about this all day long. We are very accessible at this organization. And when somebody that's been doing this just at one company for that period of time tells you that, we're trying to cut through the science fiction versus science facts with a lot of experience here. Go ahead, Joel. I think there's like 9 questions. So if we have to just stay on until they're all answered, I'm fine with it.
I think there's just one more question, I think, and we'll wrap everything up. And that is, are there any privacy concerns out there that folks should be concerned about when deploying analytics and AI in their applications?
So privacy, I mean, if we're talking about cybersecurity, then, at least I can speak from the ISS side. I mean, it's, or system to our level. I mean, it should have all the cybersecurity bells and whistles, which means encrypted connection, right, between your server camera, between your clients and your server, all the data in motion, data at rest is encrypted. So for cybersecurity, this, we take this very seriously. All data, all communications, is encrypted.
I think that's actually a really good point that we talk about a lot is to think about privacy differently. I think when you look at like first wave technology, an analog camera with an NVR, or second wave technology with an IP camera and a VMS, the public had cameras in their faces, right? And one of the first companies I worked for Video Alarm, the guy that had founded the company, Ray Pagano, his first product ever was the bubble. And it was gigantic. It was this huge tinted bubble because, people, if they didn't see the camera, they thought about it a little bit differently. Now, I think the public, I think every institution has to take a lot of measures to make sure that, you're doing as much as you can to protect the privacy in terms of who is accessing video at any time, to protect the privacy of the people that are in the video. That being said, which are you more violated by in your privacy? Is it a data hack that releases your social security number, your address, all of your personal information and everything that you have in a ransomware attack? Or is it there's a camera up and you're walking down the road? The challenge that becomes when it comes to these types of technologies, and I just wrote an article about this, is that you have the third party of the third party risk when it comes to cybersecurity. People are taking their code and they're subcontracting their code outside of the country, and those subcontractors have subcontractors, and they will change the code just a little bit and it comes back through, it installs, and now you have places like the city of Oakland, which has a ransomware attack to the point where the city can't operate, or you have airports that have their systems attacked through their identity management systems, for example, that all of the personal information of all their employees that's in the access control system is held in a ransomware attack. So the cybersecurity aspect of who are you doing business with, where are they located, where do they pay taxes, where do they go to court if you sue them, those types of things matter when it comes to securing the rest of the network and making sure that we at ISS and that the AI side of this industry is not the vector for attack when it comes to cybersecurity breaches, and it's another part. And I think it's an imperative upon, the video industry to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to secure our connection into systems to protect the data of everybody while we're making sure that we protect their privacy through who gets access to video when people are on video.
All right. Thank you, Matt. And just to close, I want to thank both Matt and Eugene for sharing their valuable insights on this subject today. Also, I want to thank all of you, our attendees, for joining us for today's program. We really appreciate it. To learn more about ISS and our portfolio of solutions, just visit www.issivs.com. Thank you. Have a great day.